My guest today is JP Marcelino, the AI ML Alliances Manager for Dell Federal. JP, thanks so much for taking the time to join me.
No, thanks for having me.
JP, let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion today. There are more than 700 use cases in the federal inventory for artificial intelligence. Now, those use cases are as of September 1st. I'm sure there's a lot more by now, but when you look at those that inventory from a few months ago, the Energy Department had the most with 177. The Department of Health and Human Services had the second most, 156. Commerce Department had 47. Homeland Security Department had 41. Now, this example is just the thirst for AI and the number of use cases that are out there. But it's not just about use cases. The money that's being spent behind this is also incredible for AI tools and capabilities. From 2020 to 2022 alone, agencies spent about $7.7 billion, according to market research firm Deltek. That's a 36% increase over 3 years. And this doesn't include all the funding that goes into systems embedded with AI, such as the DHS Insider Threat Infrastructure or the Veterans Affairs Department's Health and Data Analytics platform. Now, if we're going to look at the data for 2023 and 2024, I'm sure that will show more investments, particularly with the relatively new excitement over generative AI. In fact, over the last few months alone, a lot of agencies are following OMB's direction to offer controlled uses of Gen AI tools. The Air Force has a new platform to help with coding, correspondence, content summarization. And just recently, the Energy Department released a new reference guide for using Gen AI to really focus on key benefits, considerations, risks, and best practices when using Gen AI. So let's bring all this together. JP, you're the expert here. How can agencies kind of start to use all this information, all these tools to turn their enterprise data into smarter, high-value outcomes, while, of course, maintaining security and privacy? So, JP, that's where I'm going to start. Let's talk about where are we today with how agencies are using AI.
I think what we're seeing with agencies is kind of twofold when it comes to use cases, right? I think in general, let's take a step back and talk about the two types of AI, right? There's more traditional or discriminative AI use cases where we're just detecting patterns, doing kind of simpler analytics from the data that we're trying to leverage. And then there's the whole bucket of generative AI use cases where we're starting to generate new content based off of the data that an agency has, right? So I still think we're seeing a lot of more traditional AI use cases that are being developed within federal agencies when we're talking about things like detecting patterns in their data, being able to do image recognition in video feeds. So we're seeing a lot of that already today within our federal agencies. But then there's this push to look at more generative AI use cases. I think with the emergence of ChatGPT, I think that in general has spurred a lot of interest in looking at the art of the possible when it comes to Gen AI, right? So I think the use cases around being able to leverage your own data to be able to do the same kind of things that you could do with ChatGPT, ask it a question, and then be able to search your data repository for answers off of those questions. Being able to do that in a more secure manner, I think is really starting to gain traction from a use case standpoint within federal agencies. So I see those two buckets from a use case standpoint where we're seeing a lot already in the more traditional AI sense of doing pattern recognition and detection, but at the same time starting to see some traction around more generative AI use cases.
We're going to spend a lot of time, I think, talking on generative AI, but let me just take a half a step back and talk about that more traditional use. This is something that's been going on for quite some time. Robotics process automation. I think we're probably pushing almost 10 years since we really started to talk about that. The advanced analytics, I think that's been going on for probably 25 years. We just didn't call it AI. Is that why these use cases remain, if you will, more popular, more agencies are more comfortable because we've been doing it longer?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just because we've already seen, even though we haven't called it AI in some instances, right, where we're talking about doing more analytics focused activities and use cases, but at the same time starting to leverage things like neural networks to do a lot of those predictions, right? So I think that's already having been done quite a bit with our customers for quite a few years now, but at the same time, because of Transformers and Gen AI, and that starting to gain traction over the last year and a half, we're starting to pivot into the art of the possible with those use cases.
And when it comes to Gen AI, and I think that's where we'll spend the bulk of our discussion today, there's still a lot of dipping the toe in, making sure they understand. You see this with the Energy Department guide that I mentioned. They're very clear. This is not a policy. This is just a reference guide. And even the Air Force, I remember talking to Venus Goodwine, the CIO, back in December, and she was all like, "We're ready to go with Gen AI." Oh, maybe we're not. And then here we are. I think it came out in June. This test platform. Is that the trend you're seeing where agencies are interested? There's excitement, but they're not sure. There's still a lot of learning that's happening.
Yeah, and I think that's in part to just the rapid rate at which Gen AI is evolving, right? I think we're seeing almost like a hockey stick of advancement when it comes to Gen AI, right? So, um, obviously, I think that there's a bit of cat and mouse game when it comes to Gen AI use cases where you get caught up with what you can do with Gen AI, and then 2 weeks later, something new and innovative from either a model standpoint or from a capability standpoint comes out, right? So, I think in the case with federal customers, there's still a lot more carefulness that needs to be done, right, to make sure that nothing's being exposed from a security standpoint, and making sure all of your data is um, managed and secured in a way that doesn't get exposed with all those security concerns that are typically prevalent with more cloud-based offerings, right? So I think the additional steps that our federal customers have to take, I think also lends into that cat and mouse game of, trying to start to be a little bit more innovative from an AI standpoint, but at the same time trying to keep pace with what's evolving from AI standpoint.
I love the analogy of the cat and mouse game. Every time you think you got the mouse, it gets away. Or another one pops up. I'm sure that's not what you 100% mean, but I always think of Tom and Jerry. You got me excited for cartoons later today. JP, what's one challenge you highlighted is this kind of idea that there's something new that keeps popping up. What are some of the other challenges you're seeing, or what are some of the ways agencies can kind of get into their pilots, begin using and seeing the potential of these capabilities?
So I will say that I think in general, there's still a limited amount of folks within the federal agencies that can actually have the expertise to develop AI solutions. I think that's starting to change quite a bit, especially now that we see agencies bring on chief AI officers and starting to strategize internally what they want to do from an AI standpoint. But I still think there's a challenge around. Um, the AI workforce that's capable of developing these solutions, right? So I think in order to alleviate and offset some of those deficiencies, right? Part of it is just looking for the right kinds of partners that can help develop these solutions, right? No one's ever going to find a single partner or a single software provider that can solve everything there is to develop an AI solution, right? It really takes a village to develop these solutions, right? So whether it's a partner that can help you out early on in the process of figuring out use cases to tackle and focus on, or partners that are more in the line of helping you develop your solutions and put together proof of concepts and move them into production ready environments for you. I think it'll take quite a bit of effort from numerous partnerships to be able to solve every challenge along the way.
Without a doubt, I think agencies are getting better. They're bringing on more people, but I think just like their challenge, I'm sure industry also is facing the same set of challenges of finding the right people and enough of them. The people piece is always difficult. Are there other things that agencies are running into that are big challenges? Data, I've heard many times that okay, is their data clean? Is it accurate? Do they trust it? And then there's the opposite side. It's the culture of it all. Well, I don't want to share my data, or I have privacy concerns of what a chat GPT type of platform can do. What are some of those challenges you also are seeing?
I think in general, there have been three buckets of challenges that we've seen with customers, right? I think that the skills gap was one of them, right? The ability to operationalize and move beyond proof of concept to production is another one, and what's required to do that. And the third one is which you just mentioned there, right? Is kind of the challenges around data and data quality, right? And having the right kind of data management strategy to be able to put all the pieces together, just to even figure out if you have the right kind of data that can be leveraged for an AI solution, right? I think you might have mentioned earlier, you know, you can just easily have an AI solution that can be garbage in and garbage out, right? So you want to make sure not only you have good quality data, but also have the ability to have a good data management strategy around it so that you can pull that data from the right places and be able to have good quality data to feed into an AI solution in order to achieve the right kind of accuracy and outcomes you want out of an AI solution.
The second challenge you mentioned, ability to operationalize and move beyond proof of concept to production. I think it's related to both the skills gap and it's related to the data challenge. But why is that difficult for agencies? What is it a barrier that you're seeing stops the progress of agencies be able to move into more depth of AI? How do you overcome the operational challenges that can were roadblocks?
I think in the past we've seen that when it comes to moving AI solutions from pilot to production, there's a pretty low success rate of um, AI solutions that make it to production, right? So there's a lot of challenges that are involved with that, right? Whether it's not getting enough accuracy out of your AI solution, it's not m- meeting the right types of outputs or outcomes that you're looking to achieve from that solution, right? It could be something as simple as it's taking too much time to achieve the accuracy that you're looking to develop. And that could be a result of just not having good enough data or enough quality data to train a model to the point where it's ready for a production environment, right? So I think there's ways to help alleviate some of that, right? Whether you're implementing things like an ML ops strategy so you have better visibility into the models that you're developing and looking to deploy, being able to leverage solutions that can do things like help augment the development process, whether they're things like auto ML tools, for example, to essentially use AI to develop AI solutions, or just leveraging solutions that, in Dell's instance, right, doing things like AI factories, right, where we've taken a lot of the guesswork out of being able to deploy an AI solution into production, right? Where we can essentially provide an end-to-end capability that encompasses partner solutions with our infrastructure and hardware, with the ability to fold in other types of solutions to really package it up in an environment that's been pre-validated and makes it lower time to value to deploy these solutions.
Maybe for folks in case they're not familiar, machine learning operations, can you just maybe 30 seconds on what that is?
In short, think of it as DevSecOps for AI ML, right? So just the ability to get some visibility into things like accuracy of models over time, how the models change as you pull new data into it, whether it's becoming more or less accurate over time, right? And really just a strategy around things like how you're leveraging your infrastructure to be able to best utilize it for your different AI workloads, right? So there's a lot of different pieces to that, and that in itself can encompass multiple partner solutions in and of itself to develop an AI strategy around. So.
JP, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We come back, we'll continue our conversation, jump into that data area and why that's more so difficult, but so important for a lot of AI. But first, we'll take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is JP Marcelino, the AI ML Alliances Manager for Dell Federal. Now, JP, before break, we were talking a lot about what some of those big challenges were with getting AI, Gen AI into production. No matter how good you are in your pilot, one of the key pieces is that infrastructure to support these tools and capabilities. I think that's one of the big areas agencies are spending a lot of time on, moving to the cloud. From your perspective, what are you seeing about the need for AI infrastructure? How can they get their infrastructure in place? I know Dell Technologies has something called an AI factory. Start there with that concept.
Sure. So, with the AI factory, it's really think of it as a framework that helps enable customers a much easier time to implement AI capabilities and AI solutions, right? Um, it all starts off with the use case. So, really helping customers understand the potential use cases that they want to tackle from an AI standpoint. And then at the other end of that is understanding what goes into the AI factory, which is the data piece, right? So understanding what kind of data you have to tackle those potential use cases, whether it's good or bad data. Do you have enough of that data to not only train a solution, but also make sure that you can validate that solution as well? And then the three pieces in the middle that help enable that from a solution standpoint. One is the infrastructure and hardware piece, which I think everyone knows Dell best with that regard, right? So it's the ability for us to provide the right kind of AI infrastructure and hardware for the given use case, right? If you're looking at a really complex AI solution that requires very large language models to develop a solution, you may be looking at some really high-end compute to be able to support that kind of capability. But at the same time, if you're a single user just looking at some kind of AI sandbox or want to start developing or testing smaller AI models locally, you may not need such high-end compute for that. You may need some kind of uh, faster workstation that can support a single GPU, for example, or some really lower end compute that can handle a handful of users simultaneously, right? So that ability to almost right size the hardware for a given use case, I think, is very critical in that regard. And then the other two pieces of that is just from a services and a partnership standpoint, right? I think I mentioned before that there's really not going to be a single partner that can tackle any kind of use case, right? So just having an open ecosystem of partners that you can tap into depending on the specific use case, I think is also very key so that you have the ability to almost have a catalog of different solution providers from a software standpoint to tackle different use cases. And then the services piece is something that Dell's also implementing alongside some of our partners as well, where we can help augment kind of that workforce challenge, right, that some customers have, whether it's from a strategy standpoint, helping figure out the right use cases to focus on, to the ability to start to have and put together a data management strategy, all the way to model development and operationalizing AI as well.
Couple things to pull back the covers on this one. Let's start with the data piece. That's how we kind of ended the last segment as well. Are agencies finding from what you when you talk to them that their data is in need of a lot of help? I mean, again, it depends. I know that's the usual answer when it comes to data, but what goes into making sure your data is good enough to train the model, is good enough to do the things you need it to do?
I'm seeing two kinds of challenges right now. The first even is a step before that, right? It's the challenges around having data within different locations. They have challenges with siloed data. They don't have access to all the data necessarily that's required to develop an AI solution. So just figuring out ways to be able to get access to that data, whether we're talking about data virtualization or being able to federate access to that data, I think is an initial step that a lot of agencies are having, right? And then the other piece of that, right, is assessing the right kind of data that you have and the kind of quality data that you have, right? So being able to, I know this is a very simplistic example, right? If you're looking at an image recognition solution and you want to be able to detect cats and dogs, you don't want a whole bunch of pictures of pigs and cows as your starting data set, right? So there needs to be quite a bit of an effort involved with assessing if you even have the right kind of data to be able to train and develop an AI model and solution.
You definitely don't want pigs and cows if you're looking for cats and dogs. I mean, simple, but really to the point, because a lot of times when agencies are trying to look at their data, they really are looking for some specific outcomes or outputs. And if they're starting with the wrong set, the other piece is the partnership and services, very similar to this. Let's talk a little bit about what goes into, if you will, making a good partner. I know you'll say Dell is the best partner because you have to say that some ways, but what should they look at when they talk to partners and when they look for more services?
Right. So, yes, I would say that sometimes about Dell, but at the same time, I know that it takes more than just Dell to help a customer develop an AI solution, right? You know, we have our certain expertises, but that's not going to be enough in a lot of cases, right, for customers. So, take for example, we have a great relationship with NVIDIA, right? Obviously, NVIDIA knows best when it comes to their GPUs and how to best leverage their hardware, and at the same time, they also provide an AI software stack, NVIDIA AI Enterprise, that helps take their AI capabilities one step further and provide an even further end-to-end solution between us and NVIDIA, right? So we can take an AI capability up to a certain point, whether it's leveraging our hardware in conjunction with NVIDIA and other software partners as well, right? So to really provide an end-to-end capability that um, Dell, partners like NVIDIA, as well as a whole multitude of different ISV software providers to really fine tune and right size an AI capability end to end.
One of the things that comes to mind is the other piece of this is the hardware, and I think this is another really important thing. With agencies move to the cloud, I think that's where a lot of the excitement comes as they see more opportunities to use some of the cloud native pieces and parts. Is there challenges that come with that? Meaning, well, you're putting too much data in the cloud, the egress costs are too high, or you're buying too much compute power for the workload you really need. Is that part of that? Is that another challenge they really agencies need to be aware of as they kind of push further into AI?
Yeah, and I think part of that is due to just how easy it is to start to play around with AI with the cloud providers, right? It's an easy way to send a very small set of data up into the cloud and start to play around with what AI can do, right? But in a lot of instances, that may not be sufficient for a given use case, right? Maybe a customer's dealing with very sensitive data that they don't want to expose to a cloud provider, or they have a lot of data that's already residing in a data center, and just the cost to be able to transfer that data to not only train that AI model, but then sending data to the cloud so that you can operationalize that AI model also has its associated costs, right? So I think in some instances, it has to be really be looked at if an on-prem or a hybrid type of solution would be viable for a customer, right? And I think that's where our strategy with AI factories comes in, right? It's just the ability to, where it makes sense, provide that AI capability closer to where that data resides, right? So if you have a whole bunch of data that's very sensitive or it's within a data center already, why go through the cost of having to move that data around, where it make a lot more sense to just buy some amount of compute and bring that AI capability to where the data already resides.
And in many times, the data can reside on premise, but you can push it to the cloud to do the computation and bring it back on premise to actually look at the results. Again, you mentioned the hybrid workup. I think a lot of agencies that's where they're at. Are you seeing any trends in that way where agencies are trying to? I think most agencies do live in the hybrid world, but is that benefiting their ability to get AI, at least if not into production, at least into test and beta sooner?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I think it boils down to assessing in every agency's uh, case where it makes most sense to provide that capability, right? If they're at a very early stage and they're looking at developing proof of concepts, and they know that they're going to move to the point where they're going to start to operationalize and add additional use cases and workloads from an AI standpoint, it may even make sense to stand up a small AI sandbox, for example, where you add just a small amount of compute, but it gives you enough resources to start to play around and benchmark different AI capabilities, whether they're um, models that have been pre-trained already that you want to just start testing with your data. You can actually do that more securely on premise, and that's much more cost efficient versus having to progress in the cloud.
JP, I want to talk about success. What does success look like for AI use cases? Is it, oh, we have the right data, we have the right compute, look, we're getting good answers? Or is it what? How do you all, when you talk to customers, talk about what success looks like?
So one of the things that I like to recommend is, typically the narrow the focus and the narrow the use case, the higher probability of success a customer will have, right? Um, you can try to be like a chat GPT and boil the ocean and provide an answer for any kind of question that you provide it. But the ability to be successful in that type of solution is going to be very minimal, right? As opposed to, say, try to put together a solution where you're only taking, say, for example, specific manuals of a product that you're looking to sell, right? It's a very narrow focused set of documents and data, and being able to apply an AI capability off of that narrow set of data in a narrow use case makes it a lot easier to be successful in that type of capability.
Like so many technologies, start small, learn from it, continue to build, and success will find you. I think that's the best advice, no matter since the early days of the PC, right? Start small, go from there. JP, I very much enjoyed our conversation. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. So let me thank my guest. JP Marcelino is the AI ML Alliances Manager for Dell Federal. JP, thank you so much for taking the time today.
No, thanks for having me.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search innovation.